There are certain nights when the human heart goes completely quiet, not because love has left, but because it waits in the dark, hoping not to be misunderstood. And if these words found you today, maybe a part of you is already tired of pretending you do not care anymore, tired of holding it all together on the outside, while something inside you is still quietly hoping. Because here is what most people never say out loud. Someone may love you far more deeply than you realize. Not in the loud, dramatic way you see in movies, not with perfect timing or perfect words, but through hesitation, through emotional uncertainty, through distance that hides fear rather than coldness. And before you decide to walk away for good, there is something important you need to understand, something many people only realize when it is already too late. Some hearts do not stop loving you when they go silent. Sometimes silence is the last defense of a soul that is terrified of losing what it cannot fully put into words. Human beings are strange when love becomes real. We spend so much of our lives believing we want deep emotional connection. But the moment someone truly reaches the hidden places inside us, fear begins to wake up. When someone genuinely loves you, they do not just touch who you appear to be on the surface. They accidentally awaken the forgotten pieces buried underneath. Your insecurities, your unmet needs, your loneliness, your longing to finally be chosen without conditions. That kind of connection changes people from the inside. It shakes them in ways they were not prepared for. It exposes emotional wounds they spent years hiding even from themselves. This is why someone can deeply love you and still pull away at the exact moment you need them most. It feels like a contradiction, but emotionally, it makes complete sense. Love is not only warmth, love is exposure. Love is standing emotionally unprotected in front of another person and hoping they will not use your tenderness against you. And most people were never taught how to handle that. They learned how to survive disappointment. They learned how to appear strong. They learned how to push difficult emotions down deep inside. But they never learned how to safely receive love without fear. So when this person became emotionally attached to you, something inside them began shifting in ways they could not fully explain. Your presence started affecting their emotional state. Your silence suddenly mattered. Your attention became something they needed without understanding why. Your absence became heavier than they ever expected, and that frightened them. Because once someone gains the power to affect your inner world, the mind immediately recognizes risk. Losing them becomes possible. Abandonment starts to feel real again. Stay with this because it explains almost everything. Many people confuse emotional distance with lack of love, but emotional distance is often evidence of emotional overwhelm. There are people who go cold because they do not care, and there are people who go distant because they care too much. The second type is far harder to understand because their actions contradict their feelings. Their heart moves toward you, while their fear pulls them in the opposite direction. One part of them longs for closeness, another part whispers, "What if this ends the way everything else ended?" And without realizing it, they start protecting themselves from pain that has not even happened yet. Maybe you have felt this already. The strange inconsistency, the emotional warmth followed by sudden silence, the way they look at you when they think you are not paying attention, the way they remember small details about you without effort, the tension that exists even during ordinary conversations, and yet something still feels blocked, something unfinished. Almost as though their soul keeps moving toward you, while their mind keeps stepping back. This is what unresolved emotional wounds look like in real life. People imagine that emotional damage looks dramatic, but most of it is far quieter than that. It hides inside attachment patterns, inside fear of vulnerability, inside emotional withdrawal that nobody can fully explain. Some people disappear emotionally the moment they start caring deeply because closeness reminds them of pain they never healed. Maybe they once loved someone who left without warning. Maybe they learned as children that expressing emotions led to rejection. Maybe vulnerability once humiliated them so deeply that their nervous system now treats intimacy as danger. And the most heartbreaking part is this: they may not even understand why they are behaving this way. A person can genuinely love you while simultaneously pushing the connection away, because deep inside, their nervous system associates love with emotional risk. They want closeness, but closeness activates fear. They crave intimacy, but intimacy awakens vulnerability. So they begin sending mixed signals without fully understanding themselves. This is why real love requires patience far more than passion. Passion is easy. Anyone can feel intense desire for a moment. But genuine love asks something much harder. It asks people to remove their emotional armor piece by piece. It asks them to trust again after being disappointed. It asks them to stay emotionally open, even when everything feels uncertain. And for many people that process feels terrifying because they have spent years building their entire identity around emotional self-protection. You also need to understand something important about silence. Silence is not always emptiness. Sometimes silence is emotional processing happening beneath the surface. Some people express their emotions immediately. Others retreat inward. When emotions become too intense, they disappear into thought, into confusion, into internal conflict. Especially people who have spent their lives pushing vulnerability away. Their silence is not always punishment. Sometimes it is how they survive. But this creates painful misunderstandings. One person interprets silence as rejection, while the other is simply overwhelmed. One feels abandoned, while the other feels emotionally flooded. And slowly, two people who genuinely care about each other begin drifting apart, not because love disappeared, but because fear became louder than communication. This is where most people give up too soon. They mistake emotional complexity for emotional absence. They assume love should always look obvious, consistent, and easy to read. But the connections that matter most are rarely simple. They activate the deepest layers of who we are. They force people to face the hidden parts of themselves, the insecure, wounded, frightened parts that usually stay buried beneath confidence and pride. Real love often becomes a mirror, not just a source of comfort, but a reflection of the unresolved self. And this is why certain connections feel almost overwhelming in their intensity. They trigger emotional awakening. They reveal patterns you never noticed before. They expose your fear of abandonment, your tendency to give too much, your hidden loneliness, your desperate need for reassurance. Suddenly another person unknowingly becomes connected to parts of your identity you did not realize were still hurting. And this person you are thinking about right now may be experiencing the exact same internal chaos. They may lie awake at night replaying conversations with you, while pretending during the day that everything is normal. They may fight the urge to reach out, because something inside them keeps holding back. They may miss you deeply while convincing themselves that distance is necessary. And perhaps the saddest part of all is this. People often hurt the ones they love most, because those are the only people truly capable of hurting them back. That realization changes everything when you start seeing people through an emotional lens rather than a purely logical one. Because suddenly you stop interpreting every confusing behavior as lack of love. You begin recognizing the defense mechanisms hiding beneath the actions, the delayed replies, the emotional inconsistency, the withdrawal after moments of closeness, the fear concealed inside restraint. None of this is healthy when it continues unaddressed, but it is deeply human. And maybe this is the truth your soul needed to hear today. Not every emotionally distant person is emotionally empty. Some are simply exhausted from surviving life with a guarded heart. They have spent years telling themselves they do not need anyone, years building walls so carefully that they eventually forgot why those walls were built in the first place. Then someone enters their life and reaches places no one has touched in a very long time. That experience is both beautiful and frightening, because the closer you get to another person, the more you risk being truly seen. And being seen means having your flaws exposed, your fears revealed, your vulnerabilities uncovered. For someone carrying unresolved wounds, that level of closeness can feel completely overwhelming. They may care deeply for you and still hesitate. They may think about you constantly and still stay silent. They may feel love growing stronger every day while simultaneously searching for reasons to suppress it, not because the feelings are absent, but because the feelings have become too significant to ignore. The deeper the emotional investment becomes, the greater the perceived risk. And this creates an internal battle that few people ever discuss openly. Part of them wants to fully surrender to the connection. Part of them wants to run from it. Part of them imagines a future with you. Part of them prepares for a goodbye that has not happened yet. Their mind becomes divided between hope and fear, between desire and self-protection, between vulnerability and control. This conflict can continue for weeks, months, sometimes even years, and during that time their behavior may appear completely confusing from the outside. One day they seem emotionally open. The next day they go distant. One moment they share something deeply personal. The next moment they retreat behind emotional walls. The inconsistency is not always manipulation. Often it is internal conflict becoming visible on the surface. Remember this the next time their behavior confuses you. The truth is that many people carry emotional histories they have never fully processed. Old heartbreak, broken trust, childhood experiences that quietly shaped how they approach intimacy, unspoken disappointments, moments they never healed from. And unless those wounds are acknowledged and faced honestly, they continue influencing every present relationship in subtle but powerful ways. The heart wants connection, but the nervous system wants safety, and when those two things conflict, human behavior becomes complicated and difficult to read. That is why love alone is not always enough. Awareness matters, healing matters, communication matters, because even the strongest feelings can become trapped beneath fear if people never learn how to face their emotional reality. Yet despite all of this complexity, there is something genuinely hopeful hidden beneath it all. The fact that someone feels afraid often means the connection matters deeply. The fact that they struggle internally often means they care more than they know how to express. The fact that they cannot easily let go reveals how deeply the bond has already affected them. Love has a way of reaching places that logic cannot control. It slips past defenses. It challenges assumptions. It exposes truths people spend years trying to avoid. And once that process begins, returning to emotional indifference becomes nearly impossible, because genuine connection leaves a mark. It changes how people see themselves. It changes what they notice. It changes what they value, even when they try to deny it, even when silence feels easier than honesty. Somewhere beneath that silence, emotions continue moving, questions continue forming, memories continue surfacing, feelings continue existing, and sometimes the quietest hearts are carrying the loudest emotions. Not every person who pulls away has stopped caring. Not every silence is a goodbye. Not every distance means the connection has disappeared. Sometimes a person is fighting battles inside themselves that you simply cannot see. Sometimes they are trying to understand emotions they never expected to feel. Sometimes they are learning slowly and imperfectly how to trust what their heart already knows. There are people moving through life carrying years of silent grief that nobody ever noticed. People who became emotionally independent because depending on others once shattered them completely. People who secretly long for tenderness but become anxious the moment they start receiving it consistently. People who have forgotten how to trust peaceful love because emotional chaos became familiar to them. If this person truly loves you, their internal struggle may be far deeper than anything visible on the surface. But here is where the truth becomes more complex, and you need to hear this part clearly. Love by itself is not enough without emotional growth. You cannot rescue someone from their own patterns if they refuse to face themselves honestly. You cannot endlessly sacrifice your emotional well-being, hoping your love will eventually heal another person's fear. True connection requires shared emotional responsibility. Compassion matters absolutely, but so does self-respect. Understanding someone's wounds should never require abandoning your own emotional needs completely. This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. Mature love does not beg for scraps of attention. It does not slowly destroy itself trying to prove worthiness. It does not chase endlessly while neglecting dignity. Mature love understands patience without self-abandonment. It creates space without disappearing emotionally. It allows compassion without sacrificing boundaries. And sometimes the greatest act of love is not forcing connection, but allowing someone the emotional room to confront themselves honestly. Because transformation cannot be controlled from the outside, a person changes only when their soul becomes exhausted from repeating the same emotional cycles over and over again. Think carefully about this. Have there been moments when your inner knowing quietly told you the truth, long before your mind accepted it? Moments when you sensed their feelings beneath their words? We are far more intuitive than we realize. Something deep inside us constantly reads emotional energy, body language, silence patterns, and nervous tension long before logic catches up. That is why certain people remain emotionally unforgettable. Not because they were perfect, but because they awakened something sleeping inside you. And awakening is rarely comfortable. Sometimes it arrives through longing, sometimes through confusion, sometimes through emotional distance that forces deep inner reflection, sometimes through missing someone so intensely that you finally face the loneliness you were hiding from. Pain has a strange purpose. It strips away illusions. It exposes emotional truth. It reveals where healing is still needed. This is why some connections completely transform your inner world, even when they never become fully stable on the outside. They force growth. They force awareness. They force emotional evolution. And perhaps this person is currently standing at the edge of that transformation themselves. Maybe they are slowly realizing that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it once did. Maybe your absence has forced them to confront feelings they spent a long time suppressing. Maybe they are beginning to understand that genuine love cannot survive forever inside silence and pride. Because eventually every human being reaches a moment when loneliness becomes heavier than vulnerability. And when that moment arrives, people begin changing. Not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually. They begin recognizing the emotional walls they built around themselves. They start noticing how often fear controlled their choices. They realize how many opportunities for real connection they pushed away while trying to protect themselves from pain. And for the first time they begin understanding that emotional safety cannot exist without emotional openness. This realization can change a life, but while they navigate their own awakening, you must continue navigating yours. Do not allow uncertainty to destroy your sense of self-worth. Do not allow another person's emotional confusion to convince you that you are difficult to love. The way someone responds to intimacy reflects their relationship with themselves far more than it reflects your value as a human being. Many emotionally unavailable people are not withholding love because you are unworthy. They are withholding because they are afraid. Afraid of needing someone, afraid of emotional dependency, afraid of rejection, afraid of losing control, afraid of being seen too clearly. And ironically, the more deeply they love, the more vulnerable they feel. This creates a painful contradiction. They crave closeness while resisting it at the same time. And unless they consciously heal, they remain trapped between desire and fear. But you cannot carry the emotional weight for two souls indefinitely. You can love someone deeply and still choose your own emotional balance. You can understand someone psychologically without excusing endless emotional inconsistency. Compassion should never become self-destruction. This is one of the most important lessons emotionally aware people eventually learn. Love should expand your spirit, not slowly erase it. And yet, despite all of this, there are still connections worth everything. Rare connections where two people gradually learn each other's fears with gentleness instead of judgment. Connections where emotional walls slowly soften with time. Connections where both people choose healing instead of ego. These relationships do exist, but they require honesty. They require accountability. They require vulnerability. They require patience. Most importantly, they require two people willing to stop running from themselves. Because every relationship eventually becomes a confrontation with the self. You cannot truly love another person while remaining completely disconnected from your own emotional truth. This is why facing your own hidden wounds matters. Not in a complicated or distant sense. It simply means looking honestly at the parts of yourself you usually avoid, the jealousy you dismiss, the fear you hide, the loneliness you distract yourself from, the emotional patterns you keep repeating without understanding why. Until people face these hidden layers, relationships keep repeating the same pain in different forms. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face their own hidden wounds because of you. Perhaps your love became too real to ignore, too emotionally honest, too awakening to push away. And even if they have not fully figured themselves out yet, something inside them knows this connection matters. People do not emotionally struggle this deeply over people who mean nothing to them. Real emotional conflict exists only where genuine attachment exists. That is why indifference feels cold and simple, while love feels complicated and emotionally alive. If someone truly does not care, their energy goes flat. But when someone deeply loves you while battling inner fear, their energy becomes inconsistent, emotionally charged, confusing and intense. You feel their internal conflict, even when words are completely absent. You have probably sensed this already, the emotional pull, the unfinished feeling, the quiet inner knowing that beneath all the silence, something real still exists. Still, inner knowing must always be balanced with wisdom. Do not spend years romanticizing emotional suffering. Do not become attached to uncertainty simply because its intensity feels meaningful. Some people stay trapped in painful dynamics because emotional unpredictability creates a kind of psychological pull. The nervous system becomes attached to emotional highs and lows. Calm love can initially feel unfamiliar or even dull after chaotic emotional patterns. This is why healing changes what we are attracted to. Emotionally healed people no longer chase confusion to feel alive. They begin valuing consistency, emotional safety, honesty, peace. They stop mistaking emotional unavailability for depth. They stop trying to earn love through suffering. And perhaps this entire experience is slowly guiding you toward that same realization. Because sometimes life does not send someone into your life simply to complete you. Sometimes it sends them to reveal you to yourself, to expose your hidden wounds, to strengthen your emotional awareness, to teach you what healthy love actually requires, to help you discover the difference between longing for someone and losing yourself entirely for them. And perhaps that lesson becomes the greatest gift hidden inside this connection. Sometimes it sends them to transform you, to raise your standards, to teach you that your heart deserves real reciprocity and not endless emotional uncertainty. At the same time, transformation takes time for everyone involved. If this person truly loves you, they may currently be fighting battles that nobody else can see, battles between old wounds and new hope, between fear and desire, between self-protection and emotional surrender. And maybe right now they are somewhere alone, replaying your voice in their mind, wondering whether it is already too late to reach for you honestly. The human heart often carries regret far more heavily than rejection. Many people would rather avoid vulnerability for a while than risk losing someone permanently, until one day they realize that silence itself became the very reason they lost them. Do not underestimate how deeply people can feel emotions they struggle to express out loud. And do not stop believing that the right kind of love, the patient and honest and healing kind, is still possible for you.